Big drum roll.
Big drum roll. Welcome to 2 Inches Off the Ground. When you are enlightened, you live your life 2 inches off the ground. I am psyched for today's episode. This is our second metaphysical table talk, and today's guest has been a guest on this podcast two times. Two times. Sara Rae Hoaglund is the host of an incredible podcast called Spiritually Inspired with Sara Rae. She is also a successful manifesting coach, and I've worked with her and manifested a ton of good things during that period, and we actually have an episode dedicated to that I will link to. She is also a talented and humble astrologer who focuses on energy and obviously manifesting. Sara Rae has been on 2 episodes of this podcast, as I said, so 3 times is a charm. And here they are, just in case you want to look back. Season 2, episode 11, Pluto Return and the Great Resignation, which we both said we loved.
Yes.
And season 2, episode 23, How to Manifest Money and More. Welcome, Sara Rae.
Thank you so much for having me again, Jay. I love chatting with you. You're one of my favorite people to talk to. You're one of my favorite podcasts to listen to. So I'm really excited to be back again.
Thank you. And you can see us if everything works out fine technologically. You can see us on YouTube, and you can see my little Pebbles hair that's growing back. I look like
Pebbles. It looks beautiful. You do not look like Pebbles.
What's her name? Pebble? Is that from the Flintstone?
I know who you're talking. Yeah, I know who you're talking about, but I know you don't look like her.
So here's how the metaphysical table talk works. Source gave me a topic, and we will speak on this topic. And of course, Source gave me a topic that Sara Rae is an expert on. And Source wants me to bring it into this podcast because I actually don't talk about this area of metaphysics a lot. And Sara Rae will be speaking about her services and her podcast and her book later in the episode. I will put all the information in the show notes. And if you're watching on video, you will see all the captions. So we're just going to riff for a while. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely. I'm super excited.
All right. Yay. So here's a topic I've come up with, or Source has come up with. Are we losing the idea of the original intent of ritual? As you know, I don't like quoting from the dictionary, but I have to do it today. So a dictionary definition is: a ritual is a religious or solemn ceremony consisting of a series of actions performed according to a prescribed order. But nowadays, I'm noticing that ritual is more loosely based. And I see people, for example, they're bikers that go to bars on a Sunday and do the biking tour, and that's a ritual. I see group rituals now as people getting together and watching episodes of a reality TV show or something like that. And that is a ritual as well. So I'm seeing different forms of rituals versus when I grew up in the 1980s, when I was, dragged to church every Sunday at 7:30 a.m. until I moved out of my parents' house because I lived by their rules. And I'm describing them as they're very strict religious. They're actually not. But that was their one thing that they had to have community-wise and gathering-wise and worship-wise every week. But I see us moving away from that. In fact, I don't go to church, and my sibling doesn't go to church, and his kids don't go to church. So we've all moved away from that. So Sara Rae, what do you think is the concept of ritual, or the new concept of ritual today?
A little robin just landed right on the windowsill.
No way. Oh, that's so
like
cool.
Right as you said that. Anyway,
cool.
Totally random. But yes, rituals. I think that there is so much power in rituals. Like doing the same thing, especially at the same place on a consistent basis, whether that is like every week or every day or every year, whatever the cadence is, as long as you do that, that space begins to hold energy, that the whatever triggers are in your mind that bring you to that energy begin to exist and stay there. And it begins to, like I said, trigger that flow of energy. So you can have rituals for literally anything and everything.
Like you were saying that you you're very involved in ritual. Like you have new moon circles and you have
Yes.
manifesting circles and all of that. So how does that play into it?
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely goes back to what you were saying about that community aspect of people having rituals that they do together, not just the rituals that you do on a daily basis. Again, there's so much power in it. Like, I so look forward to my weekly rituals at my Facebook group. And we call them weekly circles. Weekly rituals was like another name that I was thinking about, but it worked out as circles because I kind of like to envision like a witchy circle when we're all together, even though it's a virtual thing. And it's the same, 20 people that come and watch every week. And it's the same people that watch it later in the week as well. So they have their own rituals. They chime in and they can see. And, every week we create this sort of energy of we're here to talk about astrology. We're here to get guidance, and the guidance comes. And every week it gets stronger because I truly believe that we're creating this sort of virtual bubble, this virtual circle, like a literal, like magic circle that we can come to again and again. And that energy, every time we do it, holds power and it gets stronger and deeper. Not unlike your thoughts in your head. Every time you think a thought in your head, it gets deeper engraved in your brain. That's a ritual, right? That's like the most microscopic ritual you can have. But the same goes with your actions in the same time and place at whatever the pattern is. Every time you do that, the energy gets stronger and it gets a little bit more deeper, a little bit stronger connection to source or whatever it is that you're doing. And we can also not talk about spiritual rituals too. And this applies to all types of rituals / habits that you can do. Every time you do it, you get a little bit more deeply involved, I guess. You're a little bit more attached to it. And I don't like that word very much, but you kind of see what I mean. Like, you get a little bit closer to it every time you do it. And that is why there's so much hidden power there. And they do have a spiritual essence in its core, because like you mentioned, the dictionary definition is a solemn spiritual ritual. But nowadays that still exists. And again, that also has a lot of power into it if it suits your spiritual practices. But there is so much more beyond that can be magical rituals that have a really big impact beyond that. And I think community is a really big part of that too, because we're community creatures, right? So your community rituals arguably are the most impactful and the strongest, especially when they're really long standing and you do them for a long time with all the same people.
So are we moving away from this idea of that strict ritual norm? And do you see rituals evolving as just for pure fun and entertainment? Do you think that's where we're going?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of like cherry picking your spirituality. As long as you don't choose to go by one particular label, you can basically pull from wherever you want, right? So if you want to go down like the more strict ritual path, I know a lot of people that love that sort of structure and they really thrive with it. And they like to like gather their tools and they like to the pretty aesthetic, and that's like helps them set the scene. It helps them channel the energy, and that's great. But I don't think that is as common as the internet would make you think it is. Like setting up a whole spell or a ritual, whatever word you choose to use, is time consuming, and it takes God further away from you. Like it makes it seem like you can't access God unless you cross over the barrier of a ritual. And I think that's really the evolution that we're seeing, is that we want our rituals to actually bring us closer to God, not to be this huge song and dance so God is happy with us. We want to be closer. So in order to be closer, we have to do it more often. And if it's this huge chore, every time I have to, break out everything and clean up and it's this big to do every time, am I going to do it? No. Am I going to feel close to God when I do it? Maybe. I think that sort of thing is super fun every once in a while, like special days, like Samhain, for example, or any solstice, really. I think those sort of strong setup rituals are awesome. But like on an everyday basis, when I just want to connect with my spirituality, like my ritual is basically just sit down and say, hey, God, how's it going? And then just do a little prayer and do some Reiki and some yoga, and that's it,
So do you think that you had talked about we talked about this before, that you talked about how fun brings us closer to God. And I thought that was a very good concept. So I was wondering if you would expand on that.
Absolutely. This is a message that I keep getting like in various ways over and over again in the last couple of weeks, for my own guidance and guidance for other people who are seeking it through me. But Spirit loves fun. Spirit really thrives on like play and childlike innocence and enjoyment, because that is what happens when you are in love. Not just like
Good
in
point.
love, but when you are dwelling in love, everything is fun. And when you're dwelling in love, there's no judgment. So you're not saying this is bad or this could be better or this isn't as fun or that whatever else it is. You're just like purely on the ride and you're just riding the wave. So it's impossible not to enjoy yourself when you're in the energy of love. So I think we have mentioned before that love and fun are very similar energies, kind of two sides of the same coin, because I really feel like you can't have fun unless it comes from a place of love, right? Like you can't obligate your way to fun, right? Like genuine fun means that you're loving what you're doing, whatever it is that you're doing, and no matter how much you're enjoying it, right?
That's true. So we also had talked about before the idea of being a parent and the idea of being a parent to a small child and ritual. So, for example, I just said that I had to go to church. I had no choice. This was my parents' ritual. They didn't care. They, I grew up in the 80s where they basically said to me, you live in my house, we pay your bills, and you're going to do this every Sunday. And it didn't matter if I came in late from a track meet at midnight. I'd still have to be in church 7:30 a.m. Sunday morning. And as I said, the result was I have not stepped in a church since I was 18, and my brother does not go to church either. So how do you show your daughter rituals without, I guess, forcing that upon her? So I'm curious.
Yeah, because what happened with you and your sibling is essentially what happens when you force someone to do something. They just completely shut down. So the goal with any child with anything is to help them see and the merit of doing it, help them understand the benefits of doing it. And we've talked about this at length before, but structure is so important for children. Like children thrive on structure. They need it. And we're all just big kids. When I was a preschool teacher and a coach simultaneously, like I found myself teaching a lot of the same concepts all freaking day long. Like I was teaching, kids maybe on like a more basic scale, like 4-year-olds, like how to sit calm and how to deal with their emotions. Mostly emotional regulation was the main work that I did with kids. So I was teaching them that with 4-year-olds, and then I would go to my coaching sessions and I was still teaching that. It just wasn't happening in the moment. I was just telling an adult like, hey, next time this happens, this is what you do, as opposed to a child when I'm addressing it in that moment. So, but essentially it's all the same thing. So we all need structure. Kids thrive on structure. They feel safe. It helps their brain not be so occupied with just getting their basic needs met. And when your basic needs are met, when everything is safe and good, then you have so much more energy to put towards other things. Because as soon as that stable ground is not there, your energy is going towards rebuilding the stability. Because especially for children, that is what the ego needs. Because children are interestingly like open to spirit and like really open to like the other side in like the most magical way, but they're also simultaneously like really driven by their ego. It's like a really interesting energetic dynamic in a child, especially toddlers. I don't just say that because I have a 2-year-old, but I also taught 2-year-olds for a while, and it's just interesting how they are so connected but also just so ego driven. Anyway, so they are thriving on their stability needed for their ego. And then that gives them more space to, build up that connection and all that stuff. So as far as rituals for like my own personal life with my own child and magical rituals, I wouldn't say this happens at the exact same time every single day. Although I just have like a window. I strive because I don't like strict timetables. I'm more of a person that strives on rituals of routine, not necessarily time, mostly because I'm a little mini rebel and I don't like you. I don't like being told what to do. Even if I say, if I look at myself in the mirror and I go, you need to be doing this at 7 a.m. tomorrow, I'll be like, no. It's like an internal argument. Yeah. So, toddlers are the same way. So I don't force her to do anything, but I do think that we have gotten to a point where she feels comfortable to do this sort of little mini ritual that we do when we wake up in our window, anytime between like 6 and 7. She immediately wants to leave her bedroom. Typically, like I take her out of her crib and she like points to this door because she wants to leave her room, right? So I take her to the couch and we sit on the couch and we do some breathing. And I will also say that there are lots of good educational shows where Evelyn has learned these sorts of techniques, like deep breathing techniques that are made for toddlers. So she's learned that through other people too. So we kind of bring that back in that moment. or I try to anyway, in the mornings if she's feeling it. She almost always is. She isn't always. And if it happens later, it happens later. And I also try to take her cues. So if she is interested in something, like if all of a sudden I catch her like doing her deep breathing on her own, I just sit down and like do the ritual again with her. And it doesn't matter what time of day it is. For kids, I think it's important to kind of catch it in the moments. For you as a human being, what you're catching, or human being, because kids aren't human, they're gorillas. As an adult human, what you're looking for is like your emotional triggers. And that's when your more casual, air quotes, rituals can come in of emotional regulation. And that all kind of comes back to building up stability too. So it's kind of all coming full circle. I hope that makes sense. And I hope that answers your question.
It does. So you're basically saying with your child, you give her free will to do these rituals. Nothing's forced upon her.
Yes.
Obviously, you give her structure during her daily routine because she's little and she absolutely needs structure. And you were a teacher and you realize that children absolutely thrive on structure, which I totally believe.
Oh yeah. But lots of studies point to that. That's not even a question.
That's not even a question. But I like how you incorporate free will as well. If she doesn't want to do the breathing, if she doesn't want to do the yoga, that's okay. But she can watch you, or she can do something else, or she can go off by herself if she's safe and all that, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So I really love that idea of free will. And then I think what we talked about before with the more events, community events, it brings security, it brings safety, it brings entertainment, it brings fun, right? And I think there's something also with that, with self rituals. So do you have any self rituals that you just have to do either every day or once a week or once a month that you cannot skimp on?
Yeah. Well, aside from like your daily rituals, like, brushing your teeth and doing the dishes, like
the basics.
I would say doing the dishes is something I absolutely have to do, even though I don't enjoy it, but it absolutely has to happen. So that's a ritual that I will not skimp on. That's not really fun though. I suppose that could be, people say that's meditative, right? But I don't know. Anyway.
I don't know. I worked with a pilot, this is a digression here, but I worked with a pilot who had 9 kids. Wow. And one of his daughters would turn on the Rocky theme, dun, 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 and would do the dishes to that every single time when it was her time. And I thought that was hilarious.
That is hilarious. Kind of like motivates you to go fast. That's hilarious and adorable.
Yeah.
So anyway, other magical rituals, I would say every Sunday-ish night, not again, time is flexible, but at some point on Sunday, I like to do like planning and like guidance for the week, where I may pull like 1 or 2 cards for myself aside from what I do, like the polls that I do during my lives on Facebook. I like to pull like some personal cards. Ironically, as you can probably imagine, Jay, a lot of themes repeat themselves anyway. So,
sure.
Because it's cards for the collective. So I do that on Sundays. I plan and I kind of look back and I do gratitude and that sort of thing. And I kind of just do like a reset. It's not necessarily spiritual in the sense that I'm sitting down to meditate with my crystals, but it is like an emotional cleanse and like I don't know, just like a reset is really the only word I have. On a more day-to-day, like afternoon basis, I like to do yoga once my daughter goes to sleep, which is at like 1 o'clock every day on the dot.
Wow.
and she's also, again, that's probably the only time I'm like really strict on times, but if we go over 20, 30 minutes, it's not a huge deal to me. But anytime between like 1 and 1:30 is yoga. And that includes also meditation, crystal Reiki at the end. That's just something I've built up to over a long period of time, because that is what I like to do in my spiritual practices. So yeah, that's what I do mainly on every single day. And then another ritual thing that isn't specifically spiritual, but it does help feed like my spiritual lifestyle and my creativity and all this stuff that makes me feel good and have fun and manifest and all that good stuff. Every night around 8:30, after Evelyn goes back to sleep for the night, I sit down and I have like creative time. And that's basically at least 2 hours without my husband. Thank God. Like, love him. But this is like 2 hours of like only for me. And I can do whatever I want. Sometimes I go to bed early. Sometimes I paint, sometimes I do yoga again or meditate. Sometimes I continue working on stuff. No client meetings. That's like my number one rule. Like that's too late. And I don't do work often because like my mind isn't always there, but it's almost always something creative. So I like to call it like my 2 hour creative time. And that literally happens every single freaking night without fail. Just like yoga happens in the afternoon, basically at nap time without fail. So yeah, those are things I do not skip on.
Interesting. I'm trying to think ritual wise what I do. My husband, he always feeds the animals, and he really gets a lot of pleasure out of feeding the cows and doing all the farming and shoveling the shit and doing all that.
Someone's got to get pleasure from that.
I know, it's not me. So he really derives pleasure from that. I do it more because I have to when he's not home, so I'm not deriving pleasure from that. But for myself, I'm trying to think of a ritual because my rituals always change. I'm actually not great with rituals. I'm not good with the constant community, as in going to somewhere every Wednesday at 7 p.m. I really stay away from that. It's just not my thing. So I'm not sure I'm very grounded in ritual, but sometimes I am, but they're changing constantly. I'm more about, I do things and they're very much a one-off. So I'm going to do this whole metaphysical course this summer, but it's a one-off thing. Yes, it'll be a ritual for the 6 days I'm doing it, but after that, it's not a ritual anymore. So I'm trying to think. I really don't know, because I wake up and besides doing the basic things, like you were saying, brushing your teeth and all that, I really don't have a super set schedule. And maybe because I don't have a child, you don't really have to have as much of a set schedule. So perhaps that's it. I don't know what it is.
When Evelyn's only 2. So when I didn't have a job, when I didn't have Evelyn, I was still doing all of this. Like I still had a full-time job and I was still coaching. Okay. Well, I wasn't calling myself a coach, but I was still podcasting and creating all that. And I didn't have necessarily like times of day, but I had things that I knew I wanted to get done. And when it came to doing those things, it was kind of ritualistic, because doing that task meant I had to follow a certain pattern to get there. And I wanted to say this too, just because you don't feel like it's a constant thing doesn't mean you don't have rituals, because rituals are all about the patterns. Like the pattern could be every month. It doesn't have to be every week. I do think the more often you do a pattern, the faster it takes hold. That isn't necessarily always a good thing or necessarily something that you want or even need. But yeah, just because you're not doing it every single week doesn't make it a ritual. It could be a monthly thing, could be a yearly thing, a biannual thing. All of those are rituals.
Okay. I have to think about that. But I feel like I don't know. I feel like I was so...
So like, do you like record your podcast at the same time every week?
No.
Oh.
I don't. I just record when I feel like it.
But you're Sagittarius. I don't understand.
Oh, are we very regimented? Are we supposed to be?
I guess I wouldn't say regimented, but I guess you still get the shit done. So maybe that's it coming out.
Yeah, I get the shit done, but I get the shit done at different times of the day. So this is really interesting, because I'm really struggling to find something. As a writer, I don't even sit down and write at the same times. And I'll write a book in 6 weeks, and then I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a break for 3 months and then go and write something else in another. So I'm not even ritualistic in that way. So I'm just, that's really interesting. I'm not even realistic when I eat. Sometimes I eat lunch at 12. Sometimes I eat it at 11. Sometimes I eat it at 3. Sometimes at 4. So I don't know. I guess I'm just not that much of a realistic, ritualistic person.
So what happens when you go, okay, it's time to meditate? What do you do?
I just meditate.
You don't like light a candle. You don't go to a special corner. You don't,
I go to the couch.
Say a prayer. Okay.
Yeah. I go to the couch usually and just do that. But sometimes I go outside because I'll go into the woods because we have wood. So I'll do that, or I'll go by the pond, or we have a tree that I can actually sit in. So I'll do that, but it just depends. So yeah, it's kind of strange now that I'm like, wow, that's kind of different, huh?
Yeah, I would look at how you like begin with tasks. Like maybe you put on music before you start working, or after an hour of work, you have to take a break or something like that.
Interesting.
Because
Yeah, so
rituals
really,
are really just another word for habits.
yeah, I think my habit is to not have rituals. So I think there is something where, and I'm not trying to take this on my parents or anything like that, but I think, certain parts of my childhood and everyone's childhood, I had free will taken away in certain
Yeah.
ways, and now it's just like freedom, have fun.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because when my husband isn't here, when he's on a business trip, it's no joke. Like I live like a fraternity boy. It's crazy. I don't shower for 3 days. I wear whatever I want. I'm walking around in sweats for days. I don't even wash my face. I feed the animals because they have to be fed. So I do all that. But unless it doesn't have to be done, it is like party time. And so I don't know. I guess I have that in me, huh?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, rituals can be pretty suffocating for
Yeah.
similar experiences to what you went through, because like you've mentioned, it took away your autonomy. So like
Yeah.
you felt like there was no choice. Therefore, I didn't want to be there. And that creates a whole nother energy around that. And of course, you can take that to the very extreme too. Like I wasn't that extreme with religion, but with dance it was that way. Like we had
You were a
certain
strict ballet dancer. You were
Oh
a
my
very
God.
serious ballet dancer.
Yes,
Did
and it
you
was
do the
horrible.
Irish dancing, or was it just your mom?
That was just my mom. I love that you
Okay.
remember that.
I
That was
remember that.
my mom and my sister did Irish and I did ballet. Yeah, just ballet tap
Which is
jazz.
so hardcore.
Yeah, so I mean that was really ritual as well. And I mean, talk about ritual, like I believe most modern dance studios do this. A ballet, like what I don't know what you would call it, like a piano play set goes in a certain order. Like you start with plies, and then you start with tendu, and then you start with the next thing, and which I'm blanking on the name on the moment, but because I haven't done it in 15 years. But yeah, you like go in a certain order, and all the tempos are usually the same. And that our ballet class was that way every single time. I mean, what we would do once we were done with like the 30 minutes of the ballet warm up, essentially, where we went through the same sequence. It was essentially a 30-minute dance, but it was just a warm up. Then things would change after that, but it was always how it started. And even with that, there was still variance because, teachers would still change it up because that's, shaking things up is good.
Yeah.
Each teacher had a different way of doing it, or sometimes they would put in different music, but we were still doing the same sequence. So I think there is a balance that can be struck between having powerful rituals that get what you want accomplished, but at the same time having freedom. Because if you do the same thing too much, it does eventually become a problem. That goes too far in the other direction. So you don't want to be like living like a fraternity frat bro forever, right? Like, that's not going to work. As fun as it might be for like a week, eventually you're like, okay, I feel so much better when I wake up and
Yeah.
shower,
And,
at
shower
least
my
every 3
body.
days, right? So yeah, I mean, there is a equilibrium that you can find, I think, between having that freedom and having that structure. And I like to think that I found it because I'm very similar.
You're balanced.
Yeah, I like to find harmony because I don't want to feel like my life is a chore. And that's when routine needs to get shooken up, is when it feels like a chore and it drags.
Yeah. And I think for me, you just made me realize that I felt so structured in high school and college, and I was never good at going to a regular job ever. Like it was just hell for me. And there's also the idea of whatever you want to call it. What's the word? Simultaneous lives, past lives, whatever you believe in. I know that in a lot of them, for me, I lived a very structured existence, and I was, in positions of inferiority, and I had no choice. I had no autonomy in a lot of my life. So I think in this life, I'm just kind of, there's a lot of just freedom in it. So that's why I think I haven't really glommed on to super rituals, and when I do, they don't last long for me. So
What do you know about your Saturn in your natal chart?
nothing.
You should look into that because
Oh, okay.
Saturn is the ruler of structure and routines, and
Oh.
is the coach and the tough cookie. Look where Saturn is on your birth chart. You want to see the sign, and then you want to see what house it's in. So the sign is like, so you have the planet, like I just said, is structure and all that, and then the sign that it's in, the zodiac, is like the clothes that it's wearing. So that's like the flavor that it's like, the mood that it's in, if you will. And then where the house that it's in, where it's standing, that's the stage that's happening on in your life. So that's my suggestion for you to kind of better understand how you fit in with routine.
Oh, I'd love to do that. That's smart.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. See, we have our resident astrologer here, so we're all good. Who knows all the answers?
Oh, come on.
You do. But before we close out, I want you to talk and thank you for conversing with me on ritual, because again, I don't bring it a lot into this podcast. Now I realize why, because I don't do it a lot. So that's why it's never been a big topic for me. So and that's why I love what you do, because you offer that community, you offer those events, you offer all of that metaphysically to your community and now my community. And that's a great thing to glom onto. So please tell us about everything. We'd like to hear about your services, your podcasts, your books. Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for that opportunity. I think that Spirit may have tapped into this because I was getting very similar messages that talking about rituals is very important right now. So recently, I'm not sure when this is going live, but recently I did 2 episodes about rituals on my podcast, the Spiritually Inspired podcast. I don't know the exact numbers, but they were in the late 120s, like 127, 128, 129, somewhere around there. One was all about the importance of practice and what it means to practice and why we have to cultivate practice.
Yeah.
Oh, they're so sweet. Thank you. I listened
to your podcast. Hello.
I know you do. And then the next one immediately after that one was like ritual ideas, practice ideas. So if you're kind of looking to get the ball rolling, those are 2 really great places to start. If you kind of like the idea of a community weekly ritual, like I mentioned a couple times in our Facebook group at 9 a.m. Central Time, I go live for like 30 to 40 minutes where we pull tarot cards, we do astrology, we do crystal Reiki together, and we just talk about the energies and any messages that come through. And it's, I respond to the comments, and it's a good time, and it's the same lovely women that come every single week. I just absolutely love it. And then also kind of going down that line, we usually do a new or full moon guided ritual, depending on the week, if it's a new or full moon. And if it's a week where there is no new or full moon, we just do a guided Reiki share, and those all happen at various times. So there's always an opportunity to come. So those aren't as ritualistic. So there's a kind of a good example of the flexibility, because the new and the full moon happens on different days all the time, right? But we still join together and we do this,
Cool.
tarot reading, and we do rituals and all that fun stuff. So that happens. So that's all that. Spirituallyinspired.co.
Yep. Yes, and Sara Rae has a beautiful website called spirituallyinspired.co. That's .co, which of course I'm going to put in the caption or in the show notes if you're listening. And the last thing I'd just like you to talk about, because I think it's so great, is you have 2 books that I think my listeners would be interested in. So if we could talk about them,
yes.
Great.
Ouch! I just punched my desk. So the first one, so I was just talking about how we do astrology, and I mentioned astrology here and like the clothes and the stage and all that. All of that comes from the Energy Almanac. If you're watching the video, you can see it here. It's beautiful. I am a contributor for this book. I write all the new and the full moon astrology happenings.
So cool.
And there's 52 weekly predictions plus a whole other holistic resources for each and every month. So this is like a whole book of rituals in itself, honestly, because you can be this is part of my weekly Sunday ritual where I go through the almanac and I see what's happening, and kind of where I get a lot of my astrology guidance from. Also,
That's
I'm a contributor.
good idea.
So, I write for it. And then the other book that you mentioned is my latest book. It is Manifesting Mindfulness and Magic. This is the complete guide to living spiritually inspired. It came out just a couple months ago. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And your favorite podcast host for 2 Inches Off the Ground, her testimony is on the back of the book.
Yeah. I have to buy it and read it. I can't wait to read it.
Oh no, you're getting sent a copy, so you don't need that.
But okay, we're going to have this all in the show notes. You just go to Sara Rae's site and you're going to get everything and explore that. And I just want to thank you again. I really appreciate you being here. And maybe I'll have you come back on. I mean, maybe before that.
I would hate that.
But no, but I was thinking if you write for the Energy Almanac for next year, I would have you come the end of this year and we can talk about the energy for next year. That'd be cool.
Yeah, we'll put it on the books because the Energy Almanac for next year is already in production, and actually it's done in production. It's already made. So
Oh, good. Okay,
so yeah,
I
absolutely.
I can buy it and all that because I'm going to buy it.
Well,
So
this year for 2023, it's out, but I meant for 2024, we're already basically done writing the content. So yeah,
when it's out, I'm
Yes.
going to, so that way I can look at everything and then we can make some predictions. I think that would be really fun.
yeah, let's do it.
Energy predictions. And thank you
Yes.
so much. And you are always just a light and so intelligent and so much energy. And I just really appreciate you. And until next time, live your life.
2 inches off the ground.
Yes. Thanks, Sara Rae.
Thank you, Jay.